Hello dear viewers, and welcome back to the ancient dwarven hold of our ancestors. Nowadays, there always seems to be talk of how large corporate video gaming, sometimes referred to as the much maligned term AAA industry, is failing terribly. There is the suggestion that some companies care not for the deliciousness of a wonderful tasting game filled with passion and heart, but rather how they can leverage whatever series they have to grope the player base for whatever coinage they have not tightly secured. Basically, dear viewers, it would appear that certain large and well-known publishers care only about maximising profit through any means possible, ethical or not. This all goes a long way with how things tend to be now in the Western world, with a lot of companies and their products. But I'm not going to go on about that. Indeed, I'm not really going to ramble on too much about my feelings on how wayward the more commercial and mainstream video game industry has become, with sadness and disillusionment. Instead, I'm here to tell you, dear viewers, that if you are of the mind that gaming is going down the toilet, with titles featuring lockboxes, premium currencies, pay-to-win mechanics and all sorts. No, I'm here to suggest to you that in the long run, I don't think it matters how they go, because the independent and the smaller studio scene, sometimes referred to as the AA scene, is the heart of the gaming industry. And I will say this, dear viewer, that there are still brilliant games being made with massive budgets, and some are not rushed out early for the player base to effectively pay to beta test. There are still wonderful treasures to find out there in the more corporate side of the industry, if you can hold tight a shelter away from the grossness of the rest of it. Let us be clear on that. But sadly, the decline towards all the things wrong with gaming is on its way, and there's little to do except stand aside as it comes crashing down on the way to oblivion. Not that one. Do not fear and do not worry, because there is an awful lot of goodness that stands aside from the rotten core of greed. There are many wonderfully talented games developers creating some great stuff that you can play right now or wishlist for when they become full releases. Like with a lot of industries, or sports, or pendulum-based baton duels, or whatever, it is the grassroots where all the interesting things are going on. It is here, down in the melting pot, where exciting things are being constructed and bold decisions are being made. It can be difficult to bat aside the overbearing presence of big-time gaming and miss some of the cracking stuff out there, but I would suggest, dear viewer, strive and strive we must, for there is a lot of great stuff going on. Perhaps you might say that there isn't anything in the genre that I like, or that they don't look as good as the way this big company does it. And to that I say, well, firstly, pretty much any category of game can be found under the hard crust of the mega mainstream output, where the succulent soil of creation and heart still manifests. And secondly, I think you might be pleasantly surprised by how well some games do indeed look. There can be a little bit of a stigma when you say indie or AA or budget title or something. It's just really niche games with bad graphics, or it's just pixel art stuff, some might say. Well, it isn't just mighty photorealistic graphics with hours of gameplay on one side and pixel art numpty doodah at the other. There is a whole range of things to choose from. There are very well done first-person shooters that look really good in both the modern graphical sense, but also in the classic boomer shooter style with pixel art and all that. There are simple looking games for sure, but it doesn't mean that there are not titles out there that strive to look as good as the mainstream stuff. That can be an interesting symptom of the embattled mindset of only playing big commercial games. Some players will not play games that aren't bleeding edge, actively discounting otherwise brilliant titles. Saying that, if that is truly only what they want to play, then fine, but I would say that you might be missing out. Pixel art especially is its own thing, its own style of doing things, and besides the obvious pull of nostalgia for us old people, it is endearing and really impressive on its own. Pixel art and stylized graphic games tend to age really well, because they are not chasing the bleeding edge and don't need monster rigs to play them at the optimum quality. It's okay not to play the latest iteration of some stagnant series of games. The fear of missing out really isn't a big thing. If a more commercial game comes out and you don't play it straight away, then that's fine. It will always be there if you want to have a look at it at later points. Indeed, this is kind of a video of itself, about not buying blockbuster games right at launch, or even pre-ordering a copy of a digital medium that will never sell out. One issue with indie and smaller studio games has a lot to do with visibility, and perhaps a stigma associated with a game that costs £30 or less instead of 50 or 60 quid. Some games are created by a small team with a small budget, or sometimes even just one person. So the chances of them ever having something resembling a marketing budget, or knowing this or that person who might be able to give them a mention, is low. Trying to get the game noticed by anyone, especially on a platform like Steam that has dozens of games releasing every week, is very difficult. Try GOG though, there's some great stuff on there. But because you haven't seen a game plastered on the front page of a storefront or some gaming website, it doesn't mean that it isn't worth looking at. Indeed, as someone who makes videos on YouTube about video games, the decision to perhaps do one about a lesser known game can be difficult. You want your videos to be seen by people, it's a very human thing, but if you make one about this Diablo-like game that you think is really cool and would love to share with people, is anyone going to watch it? Visibility really is a thing, is what I'm saying. The big games get all the attention, and not only because they have bigger marketing budgets, but also perhaps because if you don't talk about the new big fancy game, no one will want to watch. Don't worry with me though, dear viewers, I will continue to make videos on random obscure games and scrolling beat-em-ups, even if the YouTube algorithm doesn't seem to want me to. Creativity can be stifled when working for a large share-owner-driven entity. They may want the safe option, another one in the same mould as the last game that was a success. Diverting away from the known good is discouraged in favour of releasing a slight iteration of the previous game. In a more independent world, there are all sorts of weird and wonderful games that would likely never have seen the light of day if they were pitched to a large commercial company. Some of the most interesting games I've played recently come from this part of the gaming industry. Creation is out there, dear viewer, and it is thriving under the surface. All we need to do is go take a look. There definitely are small budget and indie games out there, especially on mobile, that try to get as much money out of you as possible. When you don't have a shareholder-driven corporate machine breathing down your neck though, it is a lot easier to make the game you want to make, rather than worry about how you can monetize every aspect of the game you can for maximum profit. It must be quite awful to be in a situation where you're trying to construct this wonderful game, but every new system or component is overly scrutinized from the top, with maximizing profits as a driver for whatever ends that they want. This is not to say, of course, that it isn't all roses and chocolates being a small developer. Finding the money to support the development of a video game can be very stressful. Indeed, companies go under when they can't cover costs or their game doesn't do as well as they hoped, forcing them to shut down. So in a way, you can understand why some developers might prefer to work for a large corporate entity, because you can reasonably assume that your game will see the light of day and you'll be able to pay your mortgage and keep the electricity on. Hopefully. On the flip side, there are games created by a small team of developers that have blown up, as it were, into the mainstream of gaming. This only goes to show that there is some wonderful creativity being done that does have a wide appeal and only need noticing from the players out there. So, the overall point of this video is not only to perhaps play some footage of lesser known games I've played in the background so that you might see them, but it's also to let it be known and instill some warmth in the hearts out there that there is still a healthy amount of video game creation going on. If at some point in the future some event occurs that destroys or lessens the big time commercial video game market, worry not, because there is an awful lot of great stuff going on besides all that will continue to be so as long as there are still wonderful people willing to create them. So, if perhaps your eyes might naturally descend upon the big budget flashy looking games on a storefront, perhaps, dear viewer, have a look at the lesser known games that you might otherwise not have noticed before. I think you might find something you enjoy, and maybe even open up the doorway to a wide world of independent video games, full of great fun and built with passion. And there we go, dear viewers. Another ramble on about something from this old dwarf, down in the ancient hold. As you watch this far, might I request that if you like what I do down here, and haven't already, then perhaps consider subscribing to the channel, and maybe leave a like or a comment with your thoughts on what I've said. Thanks for watching, I hope you are well, and I shall see you next time.